A black single mother stands in a gas station parking lot, her eyes locked on the paltry earnings from 14 hours of work. $9 just enough to help her asthmatic daughter make it through the week. Suddenly, her thoughts are shattered by a ragged, gasping struggle for breath. A man, a member of a notorious motorcycle gang, has collapsed from a heart attack. He is dying rapidly, yet not a single person stops to help. She looks down at the crumpled bill in her hand. Without a moment's hesitation, she spends her last $9 to buy the medicine that saves his life right then and there. And she has no idea that this single choice will bring 200 roaring motorcycles to her doorstep. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The coughing started at 4 in the morning. Kiara's eyes snapped open. She was already moving before her mind caught up, feet hitting cold linoleum, crossing the tiny apartment in 3 steps. That sound, the wet rattling wheeze that meant Zoe's lungs were closing up again. "Baby, I'm here." She pulled her daughter upright, feeling the small ribs heaving under her hands. "Breathe slow. Mama's got you." Zoe's fingers dug into her shirt. 6 years old, and she already knew not to cry during these attacks. Already understood that panic made everything worse. Kiara reached for the inhaler on the nightstand, shook it, and felt her stomach drop. Almost empty. She pressed it to Zoe's lips anyway, released the last puff of medicine, and counted 1, 2, 3, 4. The rattling eased. Zoe's body softened against her chest. "There you go. There's my brave girl." She held her daughter until the breathing steadied, until the small body went limp with sleep. Then she laid her down, pulled up the blanket, and walked to the bathroom. The medicine cabinet was nearly bare. She already knew what she would find in her wallet, but she opened it anyway and counted the worn bills. $9. A new inhaler cost $18. $9 meant bus fare to work, food for Zoe, $3 for emergencies. Except everything was already an emergency. If she bought the inhaler, she couldn't get to work. No work meant no pay. No pay meant no food, no rent, no medicine next week. Kiara gripped the edge of the sink and stared at her reflection. 27 years old. She looked 40. Go to work. Get through the day. Figure it out tonight. She walked back to Zoe's bed and knelt down, pressing her lips to her daughter's forehead. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "Mama's so sorry." The morning passed in gray silence. Kiara spread the last of the peanut butter across stale bread, scraping the jar until her knuckles ached. Zoe came padding out in her faded purple butterfly shirt, climbed into her chair, and looked at the plate. Then she looked at her mother, who was drinking water for breakfast. "Aren't you eating, Mama?" "Already did. While you were sleeping." Zoe didn't argue. She never did. She picked up the bread, took one small bite, then stopped. Carefully, she tore the slice in half and pushed one piece across the table. "You should have some too, Mama." "Baby, that's yours." "I'm full." Zoe patted her stomach. "See?" Her stomach growled loud enough to echo off the walls. The sound hung in the air between them. Zoe's face crumpled with shame, her eyes dropping to the table. Kiara couldn't speak, couldn't find words to explain why they lived like this, why she couldn't give her daughter enough to eat. She crossed to Zoe's side and pulled her into her arms, holding tight, breathing in the smell of her hair. "I love you," she managed. "I love you so much." "I love you too, Mama." She dropped Zoe at Mrs. Ruth's apartment next door. The older woman took one look at Kiara's face and pressed her lips together, holding back whatever lecture was building behind her eyes. "There's cornbread from last night," Ruth said. "Zoe and I will make sure it doesn't go to waste." "Thank you, Miss Ruth." "Don't thank me. Just come home safe." The Harbor Point Diner sat 2 blocks from the shipping docks. Cracked vinyl booths, sticky floors, the smell of old grease. Kiara had worked here for 3 years, long enough to know every water stain on the ceiling, every regular customer's order, every way Marcus found to make her life difficult. The lunch rush came and went, then the dinner rush. 14 hours on her feet, smiling, refilling coffee, pretending not to notice the looks some customers gave her. "Hey, sweetheart, come here." The man in the back booth was drunk, red-faced, slurring 3 empty bottles in front of him. Kiara walked over with her order pad. "Can I get you something, sir?" He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a handful of change. Then he threw it on the floor at her feet. "Pick it up." He grinned. "I know you people need every penny." The diner went quiet. Kiara felt every eye in the room turn toward her. The coins lay scattered across the dirty floor under the table, against the base of the booth. She looked up and saw Marcus watching from the register, arms crossed, that familiar smirk on his face. He had asked her out twice last year. Both times she said no. Both times something cold settled behind his eyes. Ever since he had been looking for reasons to write her up, cut her hours, make her shifts miserable. Now he just stood there watching her humiliation like it was entertainment. Kiara knelt down. The floor was sticky under her knees. She picked up the coins one by one. A quarter, 2 dimes, a nickel, pennies sticky with something she didn't want to identify. "That's a good girl." The drunk laughed. "See, wasn't so hard." She pocketed the change and walked away. She made it to the back hallway before the tears came, and she pressed her hand over her mouth so no one would hear. At 9 o'clock, she sat behind the dumpster and counted her tips. The coins from the floor, a few crumpled dollars from other tables, everything she had earned in 14 hours. $9. She had started the day with $9, worked a full shift, picked money off a dirty floor while a man laughed at her, and she still had exactly $9. Tomorrow, she told herself, figure it out tomorrow. She put the money in her pocket and started walking home. The Suncoast gas station sat on the corner of 51st and Halstead, neon lights flickering against the dark. Kiara stopped to use the bathroom because the diner locked theirs early. A quick stop, 5 minutes, then home to Zoe. She pushed through the front door, nodded at the bored attendant, and walked to the back. When she came out, she had no idea that the $9 in her pocket was about to change everything. Part 2. Kiara heard it the moment she stepped out of the bathroom. A harsh, rattling gasp coming from outside, someone fighting to breathe. She pushed through the front door and saw him. A man slumped against a motorcycle in the parking lot, huge gray beard leather vest covered in patches. His hand was pressed against his chest. His face was the color of ash. Kiara ran. "Sir," she dropped to her knees beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" He tried to reach for his phone, but his hand was shaking too hard. It slipped from his fingers and clattered to the ground. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed back against the motorcycle, sweat pouring down his face, lips turning blue. His eyes found hers. Pain, desperation, terror. "Hold on!" Kiara squeezed his arm. "I'm getting help." She sprinted into the gas station. The attendant, Troy, was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. "Call 911. There's a man outside having a heart attack." Troy looked up slowly. His eyes drifted past her to the window, to the motorcycle, to the leather vest. "Nah." He shook his head. "I'm not getting into that." "What are you talking about? He's dying." "Lady, you see that vest he's wearing? Those patches, that's biker gang. You get mixed up with them, your life is over. Trust me. He's a human being." Troy shrugged. "Then let him die human. Not my problem." Kiara wanted to scream. A woman in a business suit was walking through the door keys in handcar, still running at the pump. Kiara grabbed her arm. "Please, there's a man in the parking lot having a heart attack. Can you call for help?" The woman glanced through the window. Her face changed the moment she saw the motorcycle. "Sweetheart, I've seen you before." Her voice dropped low. "You take the bus with that little girl, right? The one with the braids." Kiara nodded. "Then listen to me. You have a child to think about. You get involved with these people. You're putting yourself on someone's radar, someone dangerous. He's going to die out there. Then that's on him, not you." She pulled her arm free and walked away. Kiara stood alone in the middle of the gas station. Through the dirty window, she could see the man on the ground, his chest barely moving, each breath shorter than the last. She opened her hand and looked at the 9 crumpled dollars. Then the memory hit her. Hard. Fast, impossible to stop. She was 12 years old, walking home from school. Fall afternoon leaves crunching under her shoes. She was thinking about the math test next week, about whether her mom would let her be a witch for Halloween. Then she heard her name, her mother's voice, strange and strangled. She turned and saw her mother on the sidewalk, collapsed against a parked car, hand clutching her chest, face gray, lips blue. "Mama!" Kiara ran to her, dropped to her knees. "Mama, what's wrong?" Her mother couldn't answer, could barely breathe. "Help!" Kiara screamed at the street, at the people walking past. "Somebody help us, please!" A man in a suit glanced over and kept walking. A woman with a stroller crossed to the other side of the street. Teenagers on the corner looked up from their phones, shrugged, looked back down. "Please!" She was sobbing now, shaking her mother's shoulders. "My mama's dying! Somebody call an ambulance!" Nobody stopped, not one person. For 23 minutes, Kiara knelt on that sidewalk, screaming for help, while the world walked past like she was invisible. When the ambulance finally came, her mother was already gone. Kiara held her body on that cold concrete, rocking back and forth, crying until she couldn't breathe. 12 years old, alone, watching strangers step around her dead mother like she was trash on the sidewalk. She never forgot. She would never forget. Kiara looked through the window at the man lying in the parking lot. Stranger, biker, someone everyone told her to avoid. She saw her mother. She looked at the $9 in her hand. Bus fare, food for Zoe, the inhaler her daughter needed. She walked to the counter. "Give me a bottle of water and a box of aspirin." Troy raised an eyebrow. $9.12. She put everything on the counter. $9 exactly. He stared at her for a long moment, then sighed and slid the items across. Whatever, close enough. She grabbed them and ran. The man was worse. Eyes closed, breathing almost gone. Kiara dropped beside him, tore open the aspirin box, shook 4 tablets into her palm. "Sir, open your eyes. Look at me." She tapped his face. "Come on, stay with me." His eyes fluttered open, glassy, confused, terrified. "I'm going to give you aspirin. It's going to help. Can you swallow?" A tiny nod. She put the tablets in his mouth and held the water to his lips. He swallowed once, coughed, swallowed again. "Good. You're doing good." She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. With her other hand, she loosened his vest, then lifted his head onto her lap. His hand found hers and held on like she was the only thing keeping him alive. 911, what's your emergency? "I'm at the Suncoast gas station on 51st and Halstead. There's a man here having a heart attack. He's conscious but fading. I've given him aspirin. Please send an ambulance right away." "Help is on the way, ma'am. Stay on the line." She set the phone down and looked at the man in her lap. His eyes were focused on her now. "Keep breathing," she said, slow and steady. "Look at me. The ambulance is coming." His lips moved. She leaned closer. "Why?" Barely a whisper. "Why what? Why are you helping me?" His eyes flickered toward the gas station window where Troy was watching with his arms crossed. No one else would. Kiara thought about her mother on that sidewalk, about being 12 years old and invisible. "Because someone should have helped my mama," she said quietly, and no one did. Something changed in his eyes. Recognition. Understanding. "What's your name?" he managed. "Kiara. Kiara Monroe." "Kiara." He said it slowly, like he was carving it into his memory. "I won't forget that." The roar of an engine shattered the quiet. A motorcycle tore into the parking lot, braking hard. A young man jumped off and ran toward them, late 20s, same leather vest face, twisted with panic. "Rook!" He skidded to his knees beside them, eyes wild. "Rook, oh God!" His gaze snapped to Kiara. "What did you do to him?" "I didn't do anything to him." She kept her voice calm. "He was having a heart attack. I gave him aspirin and called 911. The ambulance is on its way." "Jace." Rook's voice was weak but clear. "She helped me. She's the only one who would." Jace stared at Kiara, suspicion and confusion fighting on his face. Then he looked at Rook, at the way the older man was holding her hand, and slowly knelt down beside his fallen leader. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Getting closer. Part 3. Kiara got home just before dawn. The ambulance had taken Rook to the hospital, and she had stayed longer than she should have, answering questions from the paramedics, watching the flashing lights disappear down the street. By the time she walked through her front door, her legs were shaking and her mind was numb. She didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, staring at the wall, replaying everything. The man's gray face, the coins she had spent on aspirin, the empty space in her wallet where $9 used to be, no bus fare, no food money, no inhaler for Zoe. What had she done? At 6 in the morning, she walked next door to get her daughter. Mrs. Ruth opened the door with a look Kiara couldn't quite read. "She's still sleeping," Ruth said. "Had a rough night. Kept asking where you were." "I'm sorry. Something happened and I couldn't get back." Ruth studied her face for a long moment, then stepped aside. "She's on the couch." Zoe was curled up under a blanket, her small chest rising and falling steadily. No wheezing. At least that was something. Kiara gathered her daughter in her arms and carried her home. An hour later, Zoe woke up to the smell of toast. It was the last of the bread, and there was nothing to put on it, but Kiara had found an old packet of sugar in the back of a drawer. "Mama." Zoe rubbed her eyes and looked around the kitchen. "Where were you last night? Miss Ruth said you had trouble." Kiara set the plate in front of her daughter and sat down across the table. "I just helped someone who was sick. That's all. Nothing to worry about." Zoe picked up the toast and took a small bite. She chewed slowly, thinking. Then she looked up with those big brown eyes that always saw too much. Is the person okay now? Kiara felt her throat tighten. I hope so, baby. I really hope so. They ate in silence. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up. Cars passing, dogs barking, the normal sounds of a normal morning. Then someone knocked on the door. Kiara opened it to find Mrs. Ruth standing there, but not the Mrs. Ruth she knew. This Ruth had a face like stone, her jaw tight, her eyes hard. We need to talk. Ruth pushed past her into the apartment, not waiting for an invitation. Right now. Miss Ruth, what's wrong? What's wrong? Ruth spun around, her voice rising. The whole block is talking about you, that's what's wrong. You helped a biker last night. One of those Raven Skulls. Are you out of your mind? Kiara felt her stomach drop. How do you know about that? How do I know, girl? Everybody knows Mrs. Delaney saw you at that gas station. She told Mrs. Williams, who told her husband, who told half the neighborhood before sunrise. Ruth stepped closer, her finger jabbing the air. Do you have any idea what you've done? I helped a man who was dying. That's what I did. You helped a gang member. Those people are dangerous, Kiara. They got enemies everywhere, and now you're mixed up with them. Ruth's voice cracked. You got a child in this house. What were you thinking? Zoe appeared in the kitchen doorway, her toast still in her hand, her eyes wide and frightened. Kiara took a breath and kept her voice steady. I was thinking that a man was dying on the ground, and nobody else would help him. That's all I was thinking. Ruth stared at her for a long moment. Then she shook her head slowly, something like disappointment settling into the lines of her face. The whole neighborhood is looking at you different now. You understand that they're scared, and scared people do stupid things. She turned and walked out without another word. Kiara stood in the doorway watching her go. Across the street, she saw a curtain twitch, a face watching from behind the glass. She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. Mama, Zoe's voice was small. Are we in trouble? Kiara forced a smile she didn't feel. No, baby, everything's fine. Finish your breakfast. But everything was not fine, and it was about to get worse. At noon, Kiara walked into the Harbor Point Diner for her shift. Marcus was waiting by the front door, arms crossed, a smile on his face that made her skin crawl. Well, well, he stepped in front of her, blocking the entrance. Look who decided to show up. I'm here for my shift, Marcus. Same as always. Yeah, about that. His smile widened. I heard some interesting things about you this morning. Something about you getting cozy with bikers at the gas station last night. I wasn't getting cozy with anyone. A man had a heart attack, and I helped him. That's not what people are saying. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, clearly enjoying himself. Way I heard it, you're involved with those Raven Skulls now. And I can't have that kind of trouble around here. Bad for business. Kiara felt her hands start to shake. Marcus, you know that's not true. I've worked here for 3 years. I've never caused any problems. Doesn't matter what I know. Matters what people think. He shrugged, that smug look still plastered on his face. You're fired. Go get your stuff. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. Fired. No job. No income. No way to pay rent or buy food or get Zoe's medicine. You can't do this. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I just did. Now get your stuff and get out before I call the cops. A voice came from behind them. Marcus, come on. This isn't right. Linda, one of the other waitresses, had come outside. She was older, heavyset, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. She had always been good to Kiara. Stay out of this, Linda. Marcus didn't even turn around. She didn't do anything wrong. You know that. You've been looking for an excuse to get rid of her ever since she wouldn't go out with you. Marcus's face went red. I said stay out of it. Linda ignored him and walked over to Kiara. Honey, I'm so sorry. This isn't fair and everyone knows it. She lowered her voice. He's been waiting for a reason. Any reason. This isn't about bikers. This is about his bruised ego. Kiara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her eyes were burning, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of him. She walked into the diner one last time, collected her things from the back, and walked out without looking at anyone. She could feel Marcus watching her, feel his satisfaction radiating across the parking lot. She made it 2 blocks before the tears came. That afternoon, she stood outside Zoe's school, waiting like she did every day. Parents gathered in small clusters, chatting, laughing, normal life going on all around her. Then she saw Zoe coming through the gates, and her heart stopped. Her daughter's eyes were red and swollen. Her head was down, shoulders hunched, feet dragging with every step. She looked broken. Kiara rushed forward and knelt in front of her. "Baby, what happened? What's wrong?" Zoe didn't answer. Her lower lip trembled. "Zoe, talk to me, please." The tears started falling, then streaming down Zoe's cheeks as her small body shook with sobs. "The other kids, they said, you're a bad person, Mama. They said you hang out with criminals. They said I'm the daughter of a bad person, and they don't want to play with me anymore." Kiara felt something inside her crack wide open. "Who said that? Which kids?" "All of them." Zoe's voice broke. "Everybody. Even my friend Maya. She said her mom told her to stay away from me." Kiara pulled her daughter into her arms and held her tight, feeling the small body shake against her chest. Around them, other parents were staring, whispering. A mother she recognized pulled her own child closer and hurried away. "Listen to me." Kiara leaned back and took Zoe's face in her hands. "You did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. Sometimes people believe things that aren't true, and they act mean because they're scared. But that's not your fault. You hear me?" Zoe nodded, but her eyes were still full of pain. They walked home together hand in hand, past neighbors who looked the other way, past houses where curtains closed as they approached. That night, after Zoe finally fell asleep, Kiara sat alone in the dark living room and let herself fall apart. She had no job, no money. Her daughter was being bullied. Her neighbors thought she was a criminal. Everything she had built, every small piece of stability she had fought so hard to create, was crumbling around her. And all because she had stopped to help a dying man. She buried her face in her hands and cried silently, her shoulders shaking, her chest aching with the unfairness of it all. She thought about her mother on that sidewalk 15 years ago. She thought about the people who walked past without stopping. She had done the right thing. She knew she had. So why did it feel like punishment? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She wiped her eyes and pulled it out. A text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Meet us tomorrow at 3 p.m. Raven's Nest Diner. Very important." Kiara stared at the screen, her heart suddenly racing. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. At the far end of the street, 2 motorcycles sat in the shadows, not moving, just watching. As she looked, their engines roared to life, their headlights flicked on, and then they pulled away into the darkness. Part 4. Kiara barely slept that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, turning the text message over in her mind. Who sent it? What did they want? The motorcycles watching from the end of her street could mean protection or threat, and she had no way of knowing which. By morning, she had made her decision. She was going. Not because she wasn't scared. She was terrified. But running away wouldn't change what had already happened. Wouldn't give her job back or make the neighbors stop whispering or undo the pain in her daughter's eyes. If these people wanted to hurt her, they could do it whether she showed up or not. At least this way, she would know what she was dealing with. She dropped Zoe at school, pretending everything was normal, and spent the rest of the morning cleaning the apartment and trying not to think. At 2:30, she put on her least worn clothes and started walking. The Raven's Nest Diner sat on a corner in a part of town she didn't usually go. It was an old building, brick and weathered wood, with big windows and a faded sign that had probably been there for decades. Kiara stood across the street and stared. The parking lot was full of motorcycles. She counted 30 of them, maybe more, lined up in neat rows like soldiers at attention, chrome gleaming, leather seats, the kind of bikes that cost more than she made in a year. Her feet wanted to turn around. Her brain was screaming at her to walk away, go home, forget this ever happened. Instead, she took a deep breath and crossed the street. The door was heavier than she expected. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The noise hit her first. Conversation, laughter, the clink of glasses and plates. Then she processed what she was seeing. 40 people, maybe more, filling every booth and table. Men and women of all ages, all wearing leather vests with patches. Some had gray hair and weathered faces. Others looked barely older than her. A few women sat among them, some with their own vests, others without. The moment she walked in, everything stopped. Every conversation died. Every head turned. 40 pairs of eyes locked onto her, and the silence was so sudden and so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Kiara froze in the doorway, her body screaming at her to run. Then something happened that she would never forget. One by one, the bikers began to stand, not aggressively, not like they were preparing to fight. They rose from their seats the way you would rise when someone important entered a room, respectfully, almost reverently. First one man near the door, then a woman at the counter, then more and more, until everyone in the diner was on their feet, facing her in silence. Kiara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She had no idea what was happening. A young man stepped forward from the crowd. She recognized him immediately. Jace from the gas station parking lot. He looked different in daylight, less panicked, more composed. He walked toward her with an easy confidence and stopped a few feet away. "Miss Monroe." He nodded, his voice respectful. "Thank you for coming. Please follow me." He turned and walked toward the back of the diner. The crowd parted to let them through, people stepping aside and nodding as she passed. In the far corner, in a booth by the window, Rook was waiting. He looked different than she remembered, smaller somehow, without the desperate energy of a man fighting to survive. His face was pale, and there were bruises on his arms from where the IVs had been, but his eyes were the same, sharp, penetrating, missing nothing. He pushed himself to his feet as she approached, moving slowly, carefully, like a man still learning the limits of his body. The effort was visible, but he stood anyway. "Miss Monroe." His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher. "Please sit down." She slid into the booth across from him. Jace took a position nearby, standing with his back to the wall, watching the room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Kiara could feel the weight of all those eyes still on her, even though conversations had slowly started up again behind them. "Do you know how many people saw me collapse that night?" Rook asked. She shook her head. 4. He held up 4 fingers. "The kid behind the counter, a woman buying gas, a man in a pickup truck who drove away, and you." He lowered his hand. 3 of them saw a man dying on the ground and decided it wasn't their problem. They looked at my vest, looked at my bike, and they walked away. His eyes locked onto hers. "You didn't. I just did what anyone should do." "No." Rook shook his head slowly. "That's not true. I've been watching people my whole life, Miss Monroe. I know what they do when they're scared. They run. They pretend they don't see. They convince themselves it's someone else's responsibility." He paused. "You ran toward me. You spent your last dollar on aspirin for a stranger. You held my hand and told me I was going to be okay." Kiara didn't know what to say. She looked down at the table. "I know about your daughter," Rook continued. "About her asthma. I know you needed that $9 for her medicine, and you spent it on me anyway." Her head snapped up. "How do you know that?" "I know a lot of things." He reached into the inside pocket of his vest and pulled out something, an old photograph, creased and worn, the colors faded by time. A little girl smiled up at her from the picture, dark curly hair, bright eyes, a gap-toothed grin full of pure joy. "This is Nova," Rook said. "My daughter." Kiara looked at the photo, then back at him. 12 years ago, Nova got sick. Congenital heart defect. The doctor said she needed surgery right away, or she wouldn't survive. His voice was steady, but she could see the pain in his eyes. "I didn't have insurance, didn't have money. I went everywhere, begged everyone I knew. Churches, charities, government programs. Nobody could help fast enough." He took the photograph back and looked at it for a long moment. "She died when she was 8 years old, in my arms, in the emergency room, because I couldn't afford to save her." The diner had gone quiet again. Kiara glanced around and saw that the bikers nearby had stopped their conversations. Some had their heads bowed. "After that, I made a promise." Rook tucked the photograph back into his vest. "I swore that what happened to Nova would never happen to another family if I could help it. So I started Nova's Promise. We raise money. We pay medical bills. We help people who fall through the cracks." He reached under the table and pulled out a thick envelope. He set it in front of her. "There's $5,000 in there, enough to catch up on your rent, buy medicine for your daughter, keep your head above water while you figure out what comes next." Kiara stared at the envelope. $5,000, more money than she had seen in one place in her entire life. She pushed it back toward him. "I didn't help you for money." Rook didn't look surprised. He didn't even blink. "I know." He pushed the envelope back. "That's exactly why I want to help you, because you didn't ask for anything, didn't expect anything. You just saw a man who needed help, and you helped him. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Kiara shook her head. "I've been rich and I've been poor," Rook said. "I've met powerful people and desperate people, and I can tell you something true, real kindness. The kind that costs you something, the kind that comes with no strings attached, that's the rarest thing in this world." He leaned forward, his eyes holding hers. "I also know what's been happening to you since that night. You lost your job. Your neighbors turned against you. Your daughter is being bullied at school." He paused. "I'm the reason for all of that, and I intend to make it right." Kiara felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "How?" "Tomorrow morning, something is going to happen in your neighborhood. Don't be afraid. Just stay inside with your daughter until it's over." Rook's voice was steady, absolute. "I'm going to give you back what you lost. Your peace, your dignity, everything they tried to take from you because you dared to be kind." He sat back in the booth. "That's not a request, Miss Monroe. That's a promise." Part 5. 7 in the morning. Kiara was making breakfast when she heard it, a rumble. Low and distant at first, like thunder rolling across the sky. Then louder, closer. The windows began to vibrate. The dishes in the cabinet started to rattle. Zoe ran to the window, her eyes going wide. "Mama, Mama, come look." Kiara pulled back the curtain and felt her heart stop. Motorcycles, more than she could count. They filled the street from one end to the other, stretching as far as she could see in both directions. 200 bikes, maybe more, lined up in perfect formation, their chrome gleaming in the morning light, their engines shaking the entire neighborhood. Doors flew open all along the street. People ran out of their houses in bathrobes and pajamas, staring in disbelief at the sea of leather and steel that had appeared overnight. "Oh my God!" a woman screamed from across the street. "Call the police! Call 911! Chaos erupted. Neighbors ran in every direction, shouting, crying, pulling children back inside. Mrs. Miller grabbed her toddler and sprinted toward another house, screaming as she went. I told everyone that Kiara woman brought them here. She's brought a gang to our neighborhood." Mrs. Ruth stood frozen on her porch, her face white as paper, staring at Kiara's window with an expression of pure horror. Mr. Briggs, the landlord, came storming out of his building at the end of the block. He was a big man with a red face and a permanent scowl, the kind of landlord who showed up only to collect rent and threaten evictions. "Kiara Monroe," his voice boomed across the street. "Get out here right now. I want you out of my building today. You hear me today?" Kiara stood at her window, watching the chaos unfold, her daughter pressed against her side. This was what Rook had promised. This was supposed to make things better. But all she could see was her neighbor's terror, her landlord's rage, her life falling apart even faster than before. "Mama," Zoe's voice trembled. "What's happening? Are the bad people coming for us?" "No, baby." Kiara squeezed her tight. "No one's coming to hurt us. Just stay close to me." She took Zoe's hand and walked to the front door. Whatever was about to happen, she wasn't going to hide from it. She stepped outside. The crowd saw her immediately. Neighbors who had been running and screaming stopped and turned, their faces twisted with anger, fear-blame. "There she is." Mr. Briggs pointed at her like she was a criminal. "I want her out. She's brought these thugs into our neighborhood. You should be ashamed," Mrs. Miller shouted, still clutching her child. "You have a daughter. How could you put us all in danger like this?" More voices joined in. People she had known for years, people who had borrowed sugar from her and watched her daughter grow up, now screaming at her like she was an enemy. "Get out of here. Take your gang friends and leave. What kind of mother are you?" Zoe started to cry, pressing herself against Kiara's legs, her small body shaking. Kiara wrapped her arms around her daughter and stood her ground, saying nothing, letting the hatred wash over her. 2 police cars pulled up at the end of the block. Officers Johnson and Martinez got out, hands resting on their holsters, faces tense. They started walking toward the crowd. Then a single figure emerged from the sea of motorcycles. Rook. He walked slowly, still recovering each step, deliberate and careful. But there was no weakness in his presence. The bikers parted for him like water, and as he moved forward, the shouting began to fade. He stopped in front of the crowd directly between Kiara and her accusers. Officer Johnson stepped forward, hand still on his weapon. "Sir, I need you to identify yourself. What's going on here?" "My name is Gage Harlan." Rook's voice was calm, clear, carrying across the suddenly quiet street. "I'm here to thank this woman. 3 nights ago, she saved my life." The officer frowned. "Saved your life?" "I had a heart attack at a gas station on 51st Street. I collapsed in the parking lot. I was dying." Rook turned to face the crowd. 4 people saw me fall. 4 people watched me lying on the ground, fighting to breathe. Do you know how many of them helped silence? None. Rook let the word hang in the air. Not one. They saw my vest, saw my bike, and they walked away. They left me to die because they were afraid. He turned and looked at Kiara. She was the only one who came. She didn't know who I was, didn't care what I looked like. She spent her last $9 on aspirin and water for a stranger. She held my head in her lap and told me I was going to be okay. His voice hardened. And for that act of kindness, you people have been treating her like a criminal. Mr. Briggs stepped forward, his face still red. Now wait just a minute. We don't need your kind coming here and telling us. Your kind. Rook turned to face him, and something in his eyes made Briggs stop mid-sentence. Let me tell you something about my kind. He raised his hand and made a gesture. Behind him, the bikers began to move. They opened the storage compartments on their motorcycles and started pulling out boxes. Cardboard boxes marked with a logo, a small hand reaching toward a larger one with words underneath. Nova's Promise, helping families in need. They carried the boxes forward and began stacking them on the sidewalk. Food, milk, medicine, school supplies, toys for children, box after box after box. An elderly woman near the back of the crowd suddenly gasped, "Wait, I know that logo." Her voice trembled. "Last year when my grandson needed surgery, someone paid his hospital bill. Anonymous donation. All they left was a card with that picture on it." A man next to her spoke up, "My wife had cancer. We couldn't afford the treatments. Someone covered the whole thing." Same logo. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, people looking at each other, looking at the boxes, looking at the bikers with new eyes. Rook watched them process the information, then continued. Every year, Nova's Promise helps hundreds of families who can't afford medical care. We pay hospital bills, we buy medicine, we make sure children don't die because their parents are poor. He paused. My daughter did. She died when she was 8 because I couldn't afford to save her. That's why I started this organization. That's who we are. He turned back to Briggs. You were going to throw this woman and her child out on the street. For what? For helping a dying man. Briggs's face had gone from red to pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The crowd had gone completely silent. Some people were staring at the ground. Others were looking at Kiara with expressions that had shifted from anger to something else. Shame. Guilt. Mrs. Ruth stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. She walked up to Kiara and took her hands. "Child," her voice cracked, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I was scared and I said terrible things. Can you ever forgive me?" Before Kiara could answer, a small voice cut through the silence. "Stop being mean to my mama." Everyone turned. Zoe had stepped away from Kiara, her small fists clenched at her sides, her tear-streaked face set with determination. "My mama is a good person." Her voice shook but didn't break. She just wanted to help someone who was sick. That's all she did. Why is everyone being so mean to her? The neighborhood stood frozen. Parents looked at their feet. Mrs. Miller held her child tighter, her face red with shame. Rook walked forward and knelt down until he was eye level with Zoe. His weathered face softened in a way Kiara hadn't seen before. "You're right," he said gently. "Your mama is a good person, one of the best I've ever met. And I promise you from now on, no one is ever going to be mean to her again." He reached into his pocket and pulled something out, a small pin shaped like the Nova's Promise logo. "This is for you," he said. "So you remember that your mama is a hero. Real heroes don't wear capes. They just do the right thing when nobody else will." Zoe took the pin and looked at it, then looked up at Rook with eyes still wet with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Rook stood and turned to face Officer Johnson, who had been watching the whole scene in silence. "Is there a problem here, officer?" Johnson looked at his partner. Martinez shrugged. "No." Johnson's voice was quiet. "No problem at all. Everyone can go about their business." He walked back to his patrol car. The crowd began to disperse, people drifting back to their homes, avoiding eye contact with each other and with Kiara. Part 6. The crowd had barely finished dispersing when Rook turned back to Kiara. "Can we talk inside?" She nodded and led him through the front door, Zoe still holding tight to her hand. The apartment felt smaller with him in it. He filled the space not just with his size, but with his presence, this man who had just silenced an entire neighborhood with nothing but his voice and the truth. Rook looked around slowly, the water stains on the ceiling, the cracks in the wall, the old furniture that had seen better days. But his eyes lingered on the corner by the window where Zoe had her little study area. A small desk covered in crayons, drawings taped to the wall. Bright colors everywhere, a child's attempt to make something beautiful in a place that offered so little. "She did those?" he asked. "Every one." Kiara felt a swell of pride despite everything. "She loves to draw." Rook nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope, the same one from the diner. He set it on the kitchen table. I know you said you didn't want this, but I'm asking you to take it anyway. Kiara stared at the envelope. $5,000, enough to catch up on every bill she owed, enough to buy Zoe's medicine for months, enough to breathe. I can't just take your money. It's not my money. Rook's voice was gentle but firm. It's Nova's promise money. It's meant for families like yours, families who are struggling through no fault of their own. He pushed the envelope closer. This isn't charity. This isn't me buying your gratitude. This is me doing what we do, what we've always done. Kiara looked at the envelope, then at her daughter, then back at Rook. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just take it. For her. And she reached out and picked up the envelope. It was heavier than she expected. Or maybe that was just the weight of everything it represented. Thank you. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. A knock at the door made them both turn. Kiara opened it to find a woman standing there, mid-40s, with short gray hair and kind eyes. She wore a simple blazer over a Nova's Promise t-shirt and carried a folder under her arm. Kiara Monroe, the woman smiled. I'm Diane. I run our volunteer coordination at Nova's Promise. Mind if I come in? Kiara stepped aside, feeling increasingly overwhelmed by the parade of strangers entering her home. Diane walked in and nodded to Rook, then turned to Kiara with the folder extended. I have something for you. A job offer. Kiara blinked. A job? Community support coordinator. You'd be working directly with families who need our help. Processing applications, connecting people with resources, following up to make sure they're getting what they need. Diane opened the folder and spread the papers on the table. Full-time position, steady salary, and full health insurance for you and your daughter. Kiara looked at the papers, then at Rook, then back at Diane. I don't understand. Why me? I don't have any qualifications. I never finished school. I was studying nursing, but I had to drop out when I got pregnant. Rook spoke up. You have something more important than a degree, Miss Monroe. You know what it feels like to need help and not get it. You know what it feels like to count every dollar and still come up short. You know what it feels like to lie awake at night wondering how you're going to feed your child tomorrow. He leaned forward, his eyes holding hers. The families we help, they need someone who understands, not someone who read about poverty in a textbook, someone who lived it, someone who can look them in the eye and say, I've been where you are, and mean it. Kiara felt something stirring in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in so long she almost didn't recognize it. Hope. She thought about the years she had spent in nursing school before Zoe, the dream she'd had of helping people, of making a difference, of being something more than just another person struggling to survive. That dream had died when she dropped out. She had buried it so deep she'd forgotten it was ever there. And now, here it was being offered back to her. Her voice caught. She had to stop and start again. I don't know what to say. Diane smiled. Say yes. Kiara looked down at Zoe, who was watching the whole conversation with wide eyes. Her daughter. The reason she got up every morning. The reason she kept fighting even when everything seemed impossible. Yes. The word came out stronger than she expected. Yes, I'll do it. Diane's smile widened. Wonderful. We'll get all the paperwork sorted out this week. You can start on Monday. A shadow fell across the doorway. Kiara looked up to see Mr. Briggs hovering on the front step, his face a mixture of anxiety and forced pleasantness. He was trying to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. Miss Monroe. His voice had lost all its earlier bluster. I just wanted to say about what I said before I didn't mean, Mr. Briggs. Rook's voice cut through the landlord's stammering. Come in. We need to talk. Briggs swallowed hard and stepped inside, looking like a man walking to his own execution. Rook stood and faced him directly. I understand you were planning to evict Miss Monroe and her daughter. Is that correct? Well, The thing is, Briggs couldn't meet Rook's eyes. There were complaints. People were worried. I have a responsibility to my other tenants. Your other tenants who spread lies and treated an innocent woman like a criminal. Briggs had no answer for that. Rook continued, his voice calm, but with an edge that made the room feel smaller. Here's what's going to happen. Nova's Promise is going to fund repairs for several buildings in this neighborhood. New roofs, fixed plumbing, all the maintenance that's been neglected for years. Briggs's eyes widened. That's very generous. There's a condition. Rook took a step closer to the landlord. Miss Monroe and her daughter stay in this apartment, rent-free. For as long as she needs, until she's back on her feet and ready to move somewhere better. Are we clear? Briggs nodded so fast his whole body shook. Yes, absolutely. Clear as day. No problem at all. Good. Rook turned away from him, dismissing him without another word. Briggs practically ran out the door. Through the window, Kiara could see the bikers still distributing supplies on the street. Neighbors who had been hiding in their houses were starting to emerge. Slowly, at first, then more confidently. They approached the bikers with hesitant steps and left with boxes of food and medicine and school supplies. Some of them were crying. Some of them were smiling for the first time in what looked like years. Children started appearing. Kids who had nothing suddenly had new backpacks, new shoes, toys they had only ever seen in store windows. They ran through the street, laughing, holding up their gifts, showing them to each other. And in the middle of it all, Zoe. She had slipped outside while the adults were talking, drawn by the other children's excitement. Now she was running with them, playing with kids who had refused to speak to her just hours ago. One of the girls who had called her names at school was now holding her hand, and they were both giggling at something a biker had said. Mrs. Ruth appeared at Kiara's side. Her face was puffy from crying, and her voice was rough when she spoke. I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. She shook her head slowly. I've never seen anything like this. Neither have I. Ruth reached out and took Kiara's hand, squeezing it tight. I was wrong about you, child. I was scared and stupid, and I said terrible things. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Kiara turned to face the woman who had been like a grandmother to Zoe, like family, when she had no one else. The woman who had turned on her when she needed support the most. I forgive you, Miss Ruth, she squeezed back. We were all scared. Fear makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. I understand that. Ruth pulled her into a hug, holding on, like she was afraid to let go. You're a good girl, Kiara. Your mama would be so proud of you. The words hit Kiara somewhere deep in her chest. She thought about her mother on that sidewalk, about the little girl who had screamed for help while the world walked past, about all the years since then fighting alone, struggling alone, never letting anyone see how much she was hurting. She was crying now. She couldn't help it. The tears came, and she let them fall. Rook appeared beside her, watching the street transform before their eyes. Neighbors talking to bikers, children playing together, walls coming down that had stood for years. This is just the beginning, Miss Monroe. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. What you did that night at the gas station, it wasn't just about saving my life. It was about proving that kindness still exists, that there are still people willing to help a stranger for no reason other than it's the right thing to do. Kiara wiped her eyes and looked at the man who had changed everything. Thank you, she said, for all of this. Rook shook his head. Don't thank me. You're the one who started it. I'm just following your lead. He reached out and shook her hand, a formal gesture that somehow felt more meaningful than any hug. I'll see you at work on Monday, Miss Monroe. We have a lot of families to help. Part 7. 3 months later, Kiara sat at her desk in the Nova's Promise office, the phone pressed against her ear. Yes, ma'am. Just bring in the hospital bills and we'll see what we can do. She typed notes into her computer as she talked. No, don't worry about the paperwork. We'll help you fill everything out. That's what we're here for. The woman on the other end of the line was crying. Kiara could hear the relief in her voice, the desperate gratitude of someone who had been drowning and just been thrown a lifeline. Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't know what we were going to do. You're not alone anymore. Kiara kept her voice warm, steady. That's what I want you to remember. Whatever happens, you don't have to face it by yourself. She hung up and leaned back in her chair, looking around the small office. It wasn't much. A converted storefront with secondhand furniture and fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly. But to Kiara, it was beautiful. Every phone call was a chance to help someone. Every file on her desk was a family who would make it through another month because of what they did here. This was the work she was born to do. She was sure of it now. At 3 o'clock, she drove to Zoe's school and waited by the gate like she did every day. But everything was different now. She wasn't counting the minutes until her next shift at a job she hated. She wasn't dreading the walk home past neighbors who whispered behind her back. She was just a mother picking up her daughter with nowhere else she needed to be. Zoe came running out the moment the bell rang, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. Mama! She launched herself into Kiara's arms. Guess what? I got an A on my spelling test. Miss Patterson said I was the best in the whole class. Kiara lifted her up and spun her around. "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you, baby." Zoe's face was bright, healthy, full of life. No more dark circles from sleepless nights. No more wheezing fits that left her gasping for air. The refrigerator at home was always full now. The medicine cabinet had everything they needed. For the first time in Zoe's young life, she wasn't worried about where her next meal would come from. They walked home hand in hand, Zoe chattering about her day, about her friends, about the art project she was working on. Normal things, beautiful things. Back at the office the next day, Kiara heard a knock on her door. A young woman stood in the doorway, barely older than Kiara herself, with a baby on her hip and red-rimmed eyes. She looked exhausted, defeated, like she had been fighting a losing battle for so long she had forgotten what winning felt like. "Excuse me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Someone told me you help people here. People who can't." She couldn't finish the sentence. Kiara stood up and pulled out a chair. "Come in. Sit down. Tell me what's going on." The woman's name was Denise. Her husband had left 6 months ago, emptied their bank account, and disappeared. Her baby had been born premature and needed special formula, special care, constant doctor visits. She had been working 2 jobs trying to keep up, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. "They're going to evict us next week." Denise's voice broke. "I don't know where we're going to go. I don't have any family. I don't have anywhere to turn. She started to cry, her baby fussing in her arms. Kiara reached across the desk and took her hand. "Listen to me." She waited until Denise looked up. "A year ago, I was exactly where you are right now. I was counting every penny trying to decide between buying food for my daughter or medicine for her asthma. I thought I was completely alone. I thought no one cared." She squeezed Denise's hand. "But I was wrong. There are people who care, people who want to help. You just have to let them." She pulled out a folder and started going through it. "We're going to figure this out together, okay? The eviction, the medical bills, all of it. You're not alone anymore." Denise cried harder, but these were different tears. Relief, gratitude, the overwhelming emotion of someone who had been carrying an impossible weight and just felt it lift from their shoulders. An hour later, after Denise had left with a folder full of resources and a promise that Nova's promise would cover her baby's medical expenses, Kiara heard a familiar voice behind her. That was well done. She turned to find Rook standing in the doorway. He looked better than he had 3 months ago. The color had returned to his face, and he moved more easily now, though he still carried himself with the careful deliberation of a man who had learned not to take his heart for granted. "Mr. Harlan." She stood up. "I didn't hear you come in. I've been watching for a few minutes." He walked into the office and looked around at the files stacked on her desk, the notes pinned to her bulletin board, the families she was helping. "You're good at this, you know. Better than good." "I'm just doing what anyone would do." Rook shook his head. "No, that's not true. Most people see someone in trouble and they walk the other way. They tell themselves it's not their problem. They convince themselves someone else will handle it." He sat down in the chair across from her desk. "You're different. You see someone in trouble and you run toward them. That's rare. That's valuable. That's why I wanted you here." Kiara didn't know what to say. She still wasn't used to compliments, wasn't used to being seen as someone who mattered. "Can I tell you something?" Rook leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "When I started Nova's promise, I was angry. Furious at the world. My daughter had died and nobody had helped us, and I wanted to make sure that never happened to anyone else. But the anger only gets you so far. It burns hot, and then it burns out." He looked around the office again. "But hope is different. Hope keeps going. Hope spreads. And that's what you bring to this place. Not just the work you do, but the way you do it. The way you look at people and make them feel like they matter." He met her eyes. "You're the hope I was missing, Miss Monroe. And I'm grateful every day that you stopped to help a stranger on a cold night at a gas station." Kiara felt tears prickling at her eyes again. She seemed to cry a lot these days, but they were good tears, happy tears. "Thank you," she said, "for giving me a chance, for believing in me when nobody else did. You gave yourself the chance." Rook stood up. "All I did was notice." That evening, Kiara got home to find Mrs. Ruth waiting on the stairs, a plastic container in her hands. "I made soup." Ruth thrust the container toward her. "Too much for just me. Figured you and Zoe could use some." Kiara took the container, feeling its warmth through the plastic. "Thank you, Miss Ruth. You didn't have to do that." "I know I didn't have to." Ruth's voice was gruff, but her eyes were soft. "I wanted to. After everything, I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better." Kiara set the container down and pulled the older woman into a hug. Ruth stiffened at first, then relaxed into it, her arms coming up to pat Kiara's back. "You're a good girl," Ruth murmured. "Your mama would be so proud of who you've become." Kiara thought about her mother, about that terrible day on the sidewalk, about all the years since then growing up too fast, fighting too hard, never letting herself feel safe. "I hope so," she whispered. "I really hope so." Part 8. 1 year later, the ribbon stretched across the front doors of Nova House. Kiara stood on the small stage they had set up on the sidewalk, looking out at the crowd that had gathered. Neighbors from the old block, families she had helped over the past year, bikers in their leather vests standing shoulder to shoulder with social workers and volunteers and local politicians. And in the front row, Zoe, now 7 years old, bouncing on her heels with excitement. The community center had taken 6 months to build. It stood on the corner of 51st and Halstead, right across from the gas station where everything had started. A beautiful brick building with big windows and a playground in the back. Inside, there were offices for counselors, a food pantry, a clothing closet, rooms for after-school programs, and job training and support groups. A place for people who had nowhere else to go. Rook stepped up to the microphone, his voice carrying across the crowd. "A year ago, I almost died. I collapsed in a parking lot and I thought that was going to be the end. I thought I was going to leave this world the same way my daughter left it, alone and afraid, and wondering why nobody came to help." He paused, his eyes finding Kiara in the crowd. "But someone did come. A woman I had never met who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, spent her last $9 to save a stranger's life. That one act of kindness changed everything. It reminded me why I started Nova's Promise in the first place. Not because of anger, not because of grief, but because I truly believe that kindness can change the world." He gestured toward the building behind him. "This place is named after my daughter, Nova. She was 8 years old when she died. She never got the help she needed because her father couldn't afford it. But her memory lives on in every family. We help every child. We save every person who walks through these doors and finds out they're not alone." He turned to Kiara. "Miss Monroe, would you do the honors?" She stepped forward, her heart pounding. A year ago, she had been counting $9 in a gas station parking lot. Now she was cutting the ribbon on a building that would help thousands of families for years to come. The scissors were heavier than she expected. She positioned them over the ribbon, took a deep breath, and cut. The crowd cheered. People rushed forward to enter the building, to explore the rooms, to see what their community had built together. Kiara stayed on the sidewalk, watching it all unfold. Zoe ran up and grabbed her hand. "Mama, did you see? Everyone's so happy." "I see, baby." Kiara squeezed her daughter's hand. "I see." Later, after the speeches were done and the cake had been cut and the crowd had started to thin, Rook found her standing alone by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "You know what I thought when Nova died?" His voice was quiet. "I thought kindness was dead. I thought the world had become so cold, so selfish, that people had forgotten how to care about each other." Kiara turned to look at him. "Then I met you." He shook his head slowly. "And I realized I was wrong. Kindness isn't dead. It's just waiting for someone to pick it up and pass it on." "You picked it up a long time ago," Kiara said. "When you started Nova's Promise, when you helped all those families. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Maybe." Rook smiled, a rare expression that softened his weathered face. "Or maybe it was exactly where you were supposed to be." That night, Kiara drove home through streets that felt different now. Safer, warmer. Like the city itself had changed, even though she knew it was just her perspective that had shifted. She stopped at a red light near a different gas station, one she had never been to before. Through the window, she saw something that made her pull over. A young man sat on the curb outside the station, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He was maybe 22, wearing worn clothes and old sneakers, and even from a distance, she could see the despair in the way he held himself. Kiara parked and got out of the car. "Hey," she approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Are you okay?" He looked up. His eyes were red from crying, his face hollow with exhaustion. "I lost my job." His voice was flat empty. "Last week. I've been trying to find something else, but nobody's hiring. I spent my last money on bus fare to get to an interview, and they told me the position was already filled." He laughed bitterly. I can't even afford to get home. I've been sitting here for 3 hours trying to figure out what to do. Kiara knelt down until she was at eye level with him. What's your name? Eli. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Eli Thompson. Marcus, I'm Kiara. She reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill. She pressed it into his hand along with a small card with the Nova's Promise logo on it. This is for you. And this card, it's for a place that helps people who are going through hard times. They can help you find a job, get back on your feet. Eli stared at the money and the card like they were foreign objects. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Kiara thought about a cold night at a gas station, about a man lying on the concrete, fighting to breathe, about the choice she had made when everyone told her to walk away, because someone helped me once when I had nothing. She stood up. And now it's my turn to help someone else. Marcus's face crumpled. The tears came again, but different this time. Relief, gratitude, hope. Thank you. His voice broke. Thank you so much. Kiara smiled and put her hand on his shoulder. Don't thank me. Just promise me something. One day, when you're back on your feet, when things are better, you'll do the same for someone else. You'll see someone who needs help, and you'll stop. That's all I ask. Eli nodded, clutching the card and the money to his chest. I promise. Kiara walked back to her car and drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as Eli stood up, squared his shoulders, and started walking toward the bus stop. The circle of kindness. That's what Rook had called it. One person helps another, and that person helps someone else, and it keeps going, spreading outward like ripples on water. A year ago, Kiara had been drowning. She had been counting $9, trying to decide between medicine for her daughter and food to eat. She had been alone, forgotten, invisible. Now she was part of something bigger, something that would keep growing long after she was gone. She thought about her mother, about that terrible day on the sidewalk, about the people who had walked past without stopping. Maybe if even one of them had stopped, things would have been different. Maybe her mother would have lived. Maybe Kiara's whole life would have taken a different path. But she couldn't change the past. She could only change the future. One act of kindness at a time. She pulled into her driveway just as the last light faded from the sky. Zoe was waiting at the window, her face pressed against the glass. Kiara got out of the car and walked toward her front door, toward her daughter, toward the life she had built from nothing but $9 and the courage to help a stranger. She was home. Kiara and Zoe's story settles into the heart like a quiet reminder in a world that's quick to judge and even quicker to look away. The gentlest kind of courage is choosing kindness when it costs you something. Kiara had nothing but 9 crumpled dollars and a tired, aching hope for tomorrow, yet she still didn't turn her back. And from that small moment, a whole circle of goodness began to ripple outward, soft but unstoppable. Because most of us have faced a choice like that, maybe not in a gas station parking lot, but in the everyday places where life happens. A stranger who looks like trouble, a neighbor who needs help but doesn't know how to ask, a child who's being treated unfairly, or even ourselves on the nights when we feel invisible and worn thin. If you were in Kiara's place, scared, exhausted, and already struggling, what would help you take one more step toward doing the right thing? And if you were one of the neighbors, what would you choose to follow, fear or the truth in front of your eyes? If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us the one moment that stayed with you most, or a time someone showed you kindness when you didn't know how you'd make it through. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you'd like to support stories that carry warmth, hope, and healing, please tap like, share this video with someone who could use a little light, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep spreading gentle positive values together. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for choosing compassion. One story, one moment, one ripple at a time.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.